Picture this. You are standing in the perpetual twilight of Drask 7, a frozen mining moon orbiting a gas giant so massive its storm bands light the ice fields in a sickly green glow. The temperature reads 240 degrees below zero on the coalition scale. The wind carries crystalline methane shards that score unprotected metal in under a minute. And on a low ridge overlooking a Korathi advance column, a 34-year-old human woman lies prone in the snow, breathing slowly through a frosted respirator, loading a single-hand machined round into an unmodified Earth-issue M-class service rifle. She does not own a power-assisted exoskeleton. She has never operated a plasma lance. She is not a genetically modified super soldier from one of the Sol Corps breeding programs. She is a former asteroid belt machinist from the series Mining Cooperatives, and the rifle in her hands is the same model that 10 million coalition infantry carry across 43 star systems. Yet this quiet woman from the most unremarkable corner of human space is about to obliterate 400 years of Korathi military doctrine and end the career of the most decorated warlord in the Dominion's recorded history. The Korathi Dominion is feared across the galaxy as the ultimate armor lords. Their bulwark plate has not been pierced by a conventional kinetic round in 4 centuries of recorded warfare. Ironically, the weapon that breaks them does not come from a research laboratory. It comes from a 1962 acoustics paper on industrial drilling failures that no human archive bothered to classify. Lacking superior firepower, superior numbers, or superior technology, Sergeant Hannah Vey weaponized something the Korathi engineers never thought to test for. A frequency, a vibration, a piece of mundane Earth knowledge so common that mining unions printed it on safety pamphlets and handed it out for free. How did a working-class machinist with a standard rifle and a hand-loaded round break a 400-year military monopoly and become the woman the Korathi High Command refuses to name in official records? Before going further into this account of one of the strangest engagements in coalition military history, if you find these stories of human ingenuity worth your time, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more. And let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I find it remarkable that we can sit across so much distance and share a single story together, connected by nothing but curiosity. Sergeant Hannah Vey did not arrive on Drask 7 through any prestigious channel. The Coalition Marksman Corps recruited heavily from the Sol Corps academies, from the Martian rifle schools, from the high-altitude training facilities on Europa. Hannah came from none of those places. She grew up on the series Mining Cooperatives, the kind of place where children learn to read by studying equipment manuals, because the colony library never received its promised shipments. Her mother repaired ore processors. Her father calibrated drilling rigs. By the time Hannah was 12, she could disassemble a high-yield rotary cutter blindfolded and identify the harmonic signature of a failing bearing by the pitch of its whine. She joined the coalition late. She was 29 when she signed the enlistment papers, well past the age most marksmen completed their training. The recruiter assumed she would wash out within a month. She did not. She qualified on the rifle range with a score that the instructors initially refused to certify because they thought their measurement equipment was malfunctioning. Then they retested with new equipment and the score held. Nobody handed her a special assignment. Nobody offered her a place in the elite formations. She was posted to Drask 7, a frozen mining outpost that nobody else wanted, with a rotating garrison of 200 coalition troops and a single observation post overlooking a contested ridgeline. For the first 8 months on Drask 7, Hannah did almost nothing of military importance. She maintained her rifle. She helped the colony engineers repair their drilling equipment when the official maintenance crews were too overworked to handle minor jobs. She listened. The Drask 7 colony existed because of a rare crystalline lattice called Vescoor, which had to be cut at extremely precise frequencies to avoid shattering it into worthless dust. The mining engineers spent hours every shift discussing which vibrational profiles worked, which ones caused catastrophic failures, which industrial sonic emitters produced the cleanest cuts. Hannah sat in the mess hall after her patrols and absorbed every word. The other coalition troops thought she was strange. A marksman who spent her free time in the company of mining technicians, scribbling notes on the back of ration packaging. Her squad leader once asked her why. She shrugged and said the engineers were the only people on the moon who talked about anything interesting. The veteran observer assigned to document the Drask 7 garrison recorded her behavior in his official notes, with a single bewildered phrase that has since become famous in xeno-military academic circles. He wrote that the human sergeant appeared to be conducting an unauthorized engineering apprenticeship during her downtime, and that he could not determine whether this was a violation of coalition regulations, or simply an expression of what the humans called being interested in things. To understand how a single hand-loaded round shattered 4 centuries of military doctrine, you have to grasp a brutal and almost comedic truth about the galactic balance of power. The Korathi Dominion built their entire civilization on a single piece of technology, bulwark plate, a composite ceramic metallic armor developed in the mid-22nd century of Korathi reckoning, which had successfully resisted every conventional kinetic weapon ever fired at it. Anti-tank rounds, sabot penetrators, plasma lances at extended range, even early human railgun prototypes. Nothing punched through bulwark plate. Over 400 years, this single technological advantage shaped everything about Korathi society. Their military ranks were determined by armor quality. Their religious ceremonies involved blessing newly forged plates. Their literature, their politics, their economy, their entire concept of personal identity revolved around the unshakable certainty that a Korathi warrior in full bulwark plate could walk through any battlefield in the galaxy untouched. They stopped testing the armor. Why would they keep testing something that had never failed? Their research budgets shifted entirely toward producing more of it, faster and cheaper. Their engineering schools no longer taught the underlying physics of impact resistance. They taught the manufacturing process and the proper ceremonial maintenance schedule. Humans, by comparison, were a chaotic mess of decentralized engineering culture. Every human colony, every human industry, every human hobbyist group published their failure reports in the open. Mining cooperatives shared safety bulletins for free. Amateur radio operators traded antenna designs across light years. Machinist union handbooks sat on public databases that any species could access if they bothered to look. The veteran observers found this incomprehensible. In their official reports, they noted with genuine confusion that humans treated technical knowledge as a kind of communal resource, the way other species treated water or oxygen. The Korathi treated engineering data as classified military property worth dying for. Humans posted theirs on public forums and argued about it in the comments. A Korathi general of this exact era, asked to evaluate the human threat, dismissed humanity as a logistical curiosity. Humans had no centralized weapons development program. They had no equivalent of bulwark plate. Their military rifles were mass-produced commodity items unchanged in their fundamental design for nearly 200 years. I think this is where the Korathi made the same mistake every dominant civilization in history has made. They confused a lack of central planning for a lack of capability. They saw a chaotic, decentralized, free-flowing ecosystem of amateur engineers, hobbyist machinists, retired drilling technicians, and bored colony mechanics, and they concluded that this represented weakness. They were looking at the largest open-source research network in the known galaxy, and they called it noise. The first real engagement on Drask 7 came in the 11th month of Hannah's posting. A Korathi scout unit, 12 heavy infantry in full bulwark plate, crossed the contested ridgeline at dawn under the cover of a methane storm. The coalition garrison responded according to standard doctrine. 3 squads engaged from prepared positions. They fired hundreds of rounds. The Korathi infantry walked through the fire without slowing, without even bothering to take cover. Bulwark plate worked exactly as advertised. The standard kinetic round struck and bounced off, leaving only superficial scoring marks on the ceramic surface. The coalition squads took 17 casualties before falling back to the secondary defensive line. The Korathi scouts withdrew at their own pace, having accomplished their reconnaissance objective. The garrison commander filed an emergency request for orbital fire support and heavy anti-armor weapons. Coalition command responded that none were available within a 6-week supply window. That night, Hannah went back to her workbench in the colony machine shop. She did not request a meeting with her squad leader. She did not write a tactical assessment. She started measuring. She had recovered a fragment of bulwark plate from the morning's engagement, a small chip knocked loose by a near miss against a sharp rock outcropping. She placed it on the workbench under the colony's industrial inspection scope and ran a series of frequency tests, the same tests she had watched the mining engineers run on samples of Vesco ore for the past 11 months. The veteran observer assigned to document her activities recorded what happened next with a level of confusion that bordered on distress. He noted that the human sergeant spent 9 consecutive hours running frequency response tests on the armor fragment. He noted that she paused every few hours to consult a battered paper document that he later identified as a Series Mining Cooperative Safety Manual, 3rd edition, copyright stamp 2089. He noted that she eventually arrived at a specific frequency reading, circled it on a piece of scrap metal with a grease pencil, and went to bed. The next morning, she walked into the colony machine shop and began hand machining a custom rifle round. She did not ask permission. She did not file requisition paperwork. She simply pulled apart a standard kinetic round, modified the projectile geometry to match her calculated frequency profile, and reassembled it with the careful precision of someone who had spent her entire childhood watching her parents repair precision equipment. The veteran observer, who had been ordered to follow her at all times, asked her what she was doing. According to his official transcript, Hannah did not look up from her work. She said only that bulwark plate had a resonant frequency, the same way Vesco ore had a resonant frequency, and that nobody had ever bothered to find it because they kept testing the armor with weapons that delivered too much energy too quickly. She said that you could not break bulwark plate by hitting it harder. You had to hit it correctly. The opportunity came 6 days later, when coalition intelligence intercepted a Korathi command transmission and located the personal forward position of Commander Vasek Thal. Vasek Thal was not merely a warlord. He was the third son of the ruling Korathi family, a decorated officer who had personally led 12 successful campaigns across the contested outer systems. He wore the most ornate bulwark plate ever manufactured, a ceremonial design with gold inlay and family heraldry, and he had killed 17 enemy commanders in personal combat across his 40-year career. The Dominion's propaganda networks treated him as a living symbol of Korathi invincibility. Coalition Command convened an emergency tactical session and concluded that eliminating Vasek Thal could collapse the entire Drask 7 invasion timeline. The Korathi command structure was rigidly hierarchical. Removing the personal commander of a campaign typically resulted in weeks of operational paralysis, while the Dominion bureaucracy debated his replacement. The problem was that nobody had any viable means of eliminating him. The orbital strike option required a fleet asset that would not arrive for 6 weeks. The specialized anti-armor lances were tied up on 3 other fronts. Conventional infantry assault would simply produce more dead coalition troops. The tactical session was an hour of polite professional despair. Officers proposed plans, immediately identified the fatal flaws, and proposed new plans that suffered from the same flaws. The veteran observer attending the session recorded that the meeting had the emotional atmosphere of a funeral in progress. At the end of the session, the garrison commander asked, almost as a joke, if anyone had any other ideas. A junior officer raised her hand and mentioned that Sergeant Vey had been machining custom rounds in the colony workshop for the past week and claimed to have a working anti-bulwark solution. The room fell silent. The garrison commander asked if this was a serious suggestion. The junior officer said she did not know. They summoned Hannah to the briefing room. She arrived in her standard cold-weather field uniform, carrying her unmodified service rifle and a small leather pouch containing 4 hand-loaded rounds. The garrison commander asked her if she could kill Vasek Thal. According to the official coalition record, Hannah examined the intelligence photographs of Vasek Thal's forward position, examined the topographical map of the approach corridor, and shrugged. She said she could probably manage it from 800 meters, assuming the wind held and her math was correct. The garrison commander asked what would happen if her math was wrong. Hannah said in that case, Vasek Thal would walk away with a small scuff mark on his armor, and she would be dead within 90 seconds of taking the shot. The commander asked if she was willing to accept those odds. She said she had been bored on Drask 7 for almost a year, and at least this would be interesting. The veteran observer's transcript notes that the entire briefing room was silent for a full 11 seconds after this statement. He recorded that the human sergeant appeared to mean it literally, and that this represented either a profound psychological abnormality or a cultural attitude toward mortality that he did not yet understand. The mission was approved. Hannah left the briefing room and went back to her workbench to load her 5th round, just in case. The Drask 7 ridgeline approach took Hannah 6 hours of low crawling through methane snow. She moved alone, without a spotter, without close support, with nothing but her rifle, her 4 hand-loaded rounds, a respirator with 18 hours of remaining capacity, and a small thermal blanket. The veteran observer had been ordered to follow her at a safe distance and document the engagement, and his recorded notes from the approach describe a level of patient, methodical movement that he compared to a species of veteran deep-burrow predator that he had only ever seen in nature documentaries. She reached her firing position at the 800-meter mark approximately 90 minutes before dawn. She dug a shallow depression in the ice, lined it with the thermal blanket, set up her rifle on a folded glove for stability, and waited. Vasek Thal arrived at the Korathi forward position at sunrise, accompanied by an honor guard of 6 bulwark-armored officers and a captured coalition envoy. The envoy was a coalition diplomatic officer who had been taken during the initial Korathi landing, and Vasek Thal had decided to execute her personally as a propaganda gesture for the morning transmission to the Dominion homeworld. The forward position was theatrical by design. Vasek Thal stood on a raised platform of compacted ice, his ceremonial bulwark plate gleaming in the green light of the gas giant overhead. The honor guard formed a semicircle. A Korathi propaganda drone hovered at the edge of the platform, its camera focused on the commander's face. Vasek Thal removed his helmet. This was the moment Hannah had been told to expect. Korathi command doctrine required that propaganda executions be conducted with the commander's face visible to demonstrate personal courage and ceremonial confidence. The helmet came off. Vasek Thal's face, scarred and decorated with the ritual markings of his rank, turned toward the captured envoy. The envoy, knowing she was about to die, spoke into the drone's microphone in clear coalition standard. She said that her death would be avenged. She said that human marksmen were already in position. She said that Vasek Thal should not be so confident. Vasek Thal laughed. The transmission, later recovered from the propaganda drone's onboard storage, captured the laugh in perfect clarity. He turned to the drone's camera and delivered the line that has since been transcribed into every xeno-military textbook in the coalition. He said, "Standard rifles cannot pierce armor." He smirked. He was 47 years into a career that had proven this statement true beyond any reasonable doubt. He had stood in front of thousands of standard rifle rounds and walked away from every one of them. He believed it the way other beings believed in gravity. 800 meters away, Sergeant HFY, lying motionless in a shallow depression in the methane snow, exhaled slowly through her respirator. She keyed her open comm channel, the one that the Karatha propaganda drone was passively monitoring as part of its broadcast suite. She said, "Define can't." She pulled the trigger. The round left her rifle at a velocity that would have been considered embarrassingly slow by Karatha standards. It was not a high-energy projectile. It was not a sabot penetrator. It was a hand-machined kinetic round with a deliberately modified projectile geometry designed to deliver its energy at a specific harmonic frequency on contact. The round was not built to punch through armor. It was built to make armor punch through itself. The round struck Vusuk Thul at the lower edge of his exposed throat, just above the ceremonial collar of his bulwark plate. The impact frequency cascaded through the armor's molecular lattice in a way the Karatha engineers had never tested for. The bulwark plate did not crack. It did not shatter. It began to sing. The Vukran observer, watching from 600 meters away with high-resolution recording equipment, captured the next 4 seconds in a recording that has since become one of the most studied pieces of Zunamulata footage in galactic history. The ceremonial bulwark plate of Commander Vusuk Thul, the most decorated armor in the Karatha Dominion, began vibrating at its own resonant frequency. The vibration accelerated. The molecular bonds holding the ceramic metallic composite together began releasing. The armor did not fail at the impact point. It failed everywhere at once, the way a wine glass fails when a soprano holds the correct note. Vusuk Thul collapsed on the platform, his ornate armor crumbling around him in fine grub powder. The honor guard stood frozen, watching their commander's invincible plate dissolve into dust on the ice. The captured coalition envoy, who had braced herself for execution, stared at the scene with an expression that the propaganda drone recorded in unflinching detail. Hana was already moving, breaking down her firing position, sliding back down the reverse slope of the ridge. She had 18 hours of respirator left and a 6-hour return crawl ahead of her. She made it back to the coalition outpost with 12 minutes of breathing time to spare, limping from a counterfire wound she had taken in the calf during the withdrawal, and reported to the garrison commander that the mission was complete. The commander asked her if she needed medical attention. Hana said she would prefer a cup of coffee first if the mess was still open. The Karatha High Command refused to believe the kill report for 9 days. The first reaction was that the recording had been faked. Coalition propaganda, they assumed, had digitally manipulated the footage to discredit bulwark plate doctrine. They demanded an independent forensic analysis. The Vukran observers, whose neutrality was respected across the galaxy precisely because they had no political stake in any conflict, were assigned to investigate. A Vukran forensic team arrived at the coalition outpost on Drusk 7-10 days after the engagement. They examined the recovered remains of Vusuk Thul's ceremonial bulwark plate. They confirmed that the armor had been destroyed by molecular resonance failure, not by external penetration. They confirmed that the impact event matched the recorded transmission. Then they asked to interview Sergeant HFY. Hana received them in the colony medical bay, where she was recovering from her leg wound. She was sitting up in bed, drinking coffee, reading a battered copy of a mining cooperative safety manual. The Vukran forensic lead, a senior investigator with 2 centuries of experience in Zunamulata analysis, asked her to explain how she had calculated the resonant frequency of bulwark plate. Hana handed him the safety manual. She told him to read page 247. The page in question was a section titled Industrial Drilling Failures, Harmonic Cascade Events in Composite or Strata. It described a 2089 incident on the series Mining Cooperative in which a high-yield rotary cutter had been operated at an incorrect frequency setting and had caused a 1-ton block of armored ore to disintegrate into dust within a span of 4 seconds. The incident had been investigated, documented, and added to the standard safety manual as a cautionary example. The frequency profile of the failure event was printed in a small table at the bottom of the page. Hannah explained that bulwark plate, when she had run frequency response tests on the recovered fragment, exhibited a harmonic signature in the same general range as the armored ore from the 2089 incident. She had simply scaled the failure frequency to match the smaller mass of the armor plate, and machined a round that would deliver impact energy at that frequency. The Vukrun forensic lead asked her how long the calculation had taken. Hannah said about 9 hours, most of which was spent finding her old copy of the safety manual. The forensic lead asked her if she understood what she had done. He asked her if she understood that 400 years of Karatha military doctrine had just been ended by a publicly available mining safety pamphlet. Hannah took another sip of her coffee. She said she had understood that part going in. She said the Karatha had spent 4 centuries assuming nothing could break their armor, and that this was the kind of assumption that always ended badly, because the universe was full of weird edge cases, and somebody was eventually going to find one. The forensic lead recorded the interview in his official report with a single annotation at the end. He wrote that the human sergeant did not appear to consider her accomplishment particularly remarkable, and that she had returned to reading the safety manual before he had finished gathering his equipment to leave. The report was filed with the Vukrun Central Archive. Within 72 hours, copies had been requested by every major military intelligence service in the known galaxy. The Coalition Marksman Corps did not classify Hannah's hand-loaded round specifications. This decision, which seems extraordinary in retrospect, was made within 48 hours of the Vukrun forensic report. The Coalition leadership convened an emergency session and reached a unanimous conclusion. The round design was simple enough that any competent machinist could reproduce it with standard workshop equipment. Classifying it would only slow distribution to coalition forces, while doing nothing to prevent the Karatha from eventually figuring it out themselves. Instead, the specifications were uploaded to the Open Coalition Marksman Network, the same public forum where infantry shared rifle maintenance tips and weather adjustments for long-range shooting. The post included Hannah's original handwritten notes, scanned directly from the back of the ration packaging she had used during her initial calculations. The Vukrun observer who recorded the upload noted with bewilderment that the post received 400 comments within the first 6 hours, most of which consisted of human marksmen across 40 different star systems, offering refinements and variations on the original design. Within 2 weeks, every coalition marksman in active service had the round specifications and the ability to machine them in field conditions. Within 4 weeks, modified variants had been developed for use against 6 other types of armor used by Karatha auxiliary forces. Within 6 weeks, the Karatha Dominion's entire military doctrine was in collapse. The casualty reports from the 2nd month after Vusukthl's death are difficult to read even now. Karatha commanders, accustomed to walking through coalition fire untouched, continued operating under the assumption that their armor would protect them. They learned otherwise. 23 senior Karatha officers fell to standard coalition rifles across 3 star systems in a span of 18 days. The Dominion's propaganda networks went silent for a week, then resumed broadcasting with strict new protocols requiring all senior officers to wear full sealed helmets at all times. It did not matter. The round design worked against bulwark plate regardless of helmet position, as long as the marksman had a clear line of sight to any unprotected molecular junction in the armor's surface. The Karatha attempted to develop a counter-design. Their engineers, who had not seriously studied armor physics in over a century, struggled to even understand the failure mode. The internal Karatha engineering reports from this period, later recovered by coalition intelligence, describe a profound institutional crisis. The Dominion's military research apparatus had atrophied so completely that they had to recruit civilian metallurgists from their colonial industries to even begin investigating the problem. By the end of the second month, the Drask 7 invasion had collapsed entirely. Korathi forces withdrew from the system without negotiating terms. Within 6 months, 3 other contested fronts had been abandoned. The Dominion's 4-century-long campaign of expansion ended not with a fleet engagement, not with a battle for a capital world, but with the quiet realization across the Korathi command structure that their armor no longer worked, and they had no idea how to fix it. Hannah was offered the Coalition Star of Valor, the highest decoration available to enlisted personnel. She was offered a commission as a major in the Marksman Corps. She was offered a teaching position at the Saul Corps Academy. She was offered a statue on the Coalition homeworld, a parade through the capital city, a book deal, 3 different documentary contracts, and a private audience with the Coalition First Minister. She declined all of it. The Vekran observer who had been documenting her activities since her arrival on Drask 7 was present for the discharge meeting. His official transcript records the conversation with the same patient bewilderment that characterizes all of his reports on human behavior. The Coalition discharge officer listed the available honors. Hannah listened politely. When he was finished, she asked if she could simply return to Ceres and go back to repairing mining equipment. The discharge officer asked if she was sure. Hannah said the Coalition had been good to her, and she had no complaints about her service, but she had been thinking about her parents' workshop for the past 4 months, and she missed the smell of cutting fluid. She said the mining cooperative had been short on senior machinists since before she enlisted, and she had a lot of catching up to do. The discharge officer asked if she understood that her name was now known across the galaxy, that she had ended a 4-century military doctrine, that history would remember her. Hannah shrugged. She said history could remember whatever it wanted, but the rotary cutters on Ceres were not going to recalibrate themselves. She left Coalition service 3 days later. She returned to Ceres on a standard civilian transport, carrying her discharge papers, her unmodified service rifle, which the Coalition had permitted her to keep as a memento, and the same battered copy of the Mining Cooperative Safety Manual she had been reading in the medical bay. The Vekran observer, whose assignment to her had technically ended with her discharge, requested permission to follow her to Ceres for an additional 6 months of observation. The request was approved. He recorded that she resumed work at her parents' machine shop within a week of her return. He recorded that she repaired rotary cutters, calibrated drilling rigs, and trained 2 new apprentices in precision machining techniques. He recorded that nobody on the mining cooperative seemed to treat her any differently than they had before her enlistment, except that her father occasionally introduced her to new colony arrivals as my daughter, the one who shot the Korathi. Hannah did not appear to mind. She did not give interviews. She did not write a memoir. She did not attend any of the commemorative events held in her honor across the Coalition. She died at 73, peacefully, in the same colony where she had been born, surrounded by the rotary cutters she had spent her life repairing. The Coalition held a small memorial service. The mining cooperative held a larger one. The official cause of death was listed as natural age-related decline. The Vekran observer who had documented her career filed his final report 11 years after her death. The report has since been studied across the galaxy as one of the most important pieces of xenoanthropological analysis ever produced about humanity. He concluded that humans were not dangerous because they were stronger than other species, or smarter, or more advanced. They were dangerous because they refused to assume that anything was impossible, until they had personally tested it and watched it fail. The Korathi Dominion had built 4 centuries of civilization on a single untested assumption. Humans had spent 200 years publishing free safety pamphlets about industrial drilling failures. When the two cultures collided, the assumption lost. The military implications of Hannah's shot continued to ripple through the galaxy for decades. Other species began to study their own untested assumptions, looking for the hidden frequencies, the unconsidered angles, the weaknesses that nobody had ever bothered to check. Some of them found things. Most of them did not, because they did not have the chaotic, decentralized engineering culture that allowed humans to stumble across solutions in mining safety pamphlets from 2089. When you examine the modern coalition military doctrine of open-source defensive analysis, you are essentially watching Hannah Vey's methodology executed at the scale of an entire civilization. Coalition forces do not assume their own armor works. They publish their failure modes openly, invite criticism from civilian engineers, and treat any unchallenged assumption as a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. The doctrine has saved an estimated 40 million lives across 3 centuries of coalition operations. She did not invent this approach. She simply demonstrated, with a single hand-loaded round on a frozen ridgeline, what could happen when an entire civilization assumed it was invulnerable and never bothered to check. Think about how the galaxy remembers history. We recognize the names of fleet admirals and grand strategists. We recognize the heroes of major engagements, the commanders of famous victories, the politicians who signed the treaties. Yet the woman who ended the Korathi Dominion remained, throughout her life, a working-class machinist who preferred the smell of cutting fluid to the sound of parades. Does history only remember the loud while the quiet architects of its greatest changes fade into the background? Thank you for spending this time with me, exploring the strange and brutal story of a sergeant who carried a standard rifle and an unstandard imagination. If you found this account of human ingenuity worth your attention, please consider hitting that subscribe button and leaving a like. And let me know in the comments what assumptions in your own world you have never bothered to test.